Hello, check check 1 2. Okay. Just finished seeing The Last Jedi about 2 hours ago, um, and I have a lot of thoughts. I don't normally do the ranty thing, but I just have to rant and get it out, and we'll see how this goes. Overall, I liked the film. I found it quite surprising, and which was very hard to go into this film. It was hard to go into this film without any hype, without any anticipation, namely because Rian Johnson had been, ever since Rian Johnson had been assigned as both screenwriter and director, which is very surprising considering the sort of the Disney and Lucasfilm, like the tight control that they are going to rightfully want to exert on this franchise. But with Rian Johnson, I remember back in 2000, oh gosh, 2000, in between 2005 and 2007, we saw a film, me and my classmates, about we saw a film called Brick, directed by Rian Johnson. I believe it was his first feature film. And I was blown away by it. It showed me that Rian Johnson, while I know lots of people will shun the term auteur, I know that lots of people will shun the term auteur, that he understands the language of film. The fact that he was able to make a film noir detective story set in a high school with all of the teenage angst and trappings that exist in a high school setting. It's an incredible mishmash of a film, and I didn't know what the film was before I went and saw that film, and it was just amazing. And so I basically can't go into any Rian Johnson films knowing anything about them. I kind of do a full media blackout and never expose myself to them, because while he doesn't have a consistent style, he's always willing to try new things, but he understands what film means, what a shot means, this is very basic terms in talking about filmmaking, but he understands what he needs to do to communicate a story, but also to surprise you. And he's also not afraid to mash things together in different ways. And the amount of confidence as a filmmaker that he exhibited in Brick was astounding. I believe that it kind of sits on the same level as, say, like, Christopher Nolan's early films like Memento. When he was starting out, like the first watch of Memento is kind of similar to the first watch I ever had of Brick. And I do believe that Rian Johnson is sort of a filmmaker with a sensibility on level with Christopher Nolan. Not the same as Christopher Nolan, but like that he can hold his own, because he is very passionate about films and makes very interesting decisions with them. I haven't even talked about Star Wars at all. We're getting into that. So Rian Johnson has also, the interesting thing too is that as much as a quote-unquote auteur, even though he has never done, like, I would say, does he have a consistent body of work? No, because his consistency seems to be his inconsistency. Inconsistent. He doesn't just do the same thing twice. Anyway, he's like, if you watch The Brothers Bloom, it's a very different film from Brick. And I didn't like The Brothers Bloom, but again, it was still like Rian Johnson gets a blank check from me for whatever he wants to do creatively. So to find out he was doing Star Wars was very interesting. First, because he's Rian Johnson, coming from like a smaller independent film kind of background, and did some medium-sized films, and then again with Looper. Again, that was a very different film from The Brothers Bloom. But it's also interesting how a lot of these directors will end up doing, at some point in their careers, a science fiction film. There's always this need or drive to tackle a big science fiction film in some way. And to hear that he was doing Star Wars was just, it put me through the roof. It was words I never expected to hear. Another thing is that Rian Johnson has also proved himself to be capable of taking on other people's material. Of course, he's directed some episodes of TV shows, most notably Breaking Bad, in what many fans of the show would consider to be the best episodes of Breaking Bad. And so he is in a wonderful spot creatively because he's shown that he has creative chops, that he can manage very interesting material, but that he can also do it within the framework of somebody else's franchise. I think if he hadn't had done some of that TV work with Breaking Bad, he probably wouldn't have been in as good a place to just take over and do a Star Wars film. Now, this film starts very rapidly. This film is a very fast-moving film. I do wish in places that it had slowed down, and I might talk about some of the places I wish it had slowed down earlier. Most of this is a film I think I'm going to grow to love more over time. Even though with my first initial viewing, I was very excited the whole time while watching it. I do have a lot of problems with it. I think there are definitely some pacing problems. I'm going to bounce around a lot, but back to the beginning of the film. So, we're getting set up with sort of the framing device of the film where they have the rebels are fleeing and you have these big spaceships. And I just kept thinking when the what do they call the not the Brigadoon, but the the big giant dreadnought. When the dreadnought shows up and they aim the guns at the planet, I just kept wanting them to be like, fire, and have them fire the big missile or the big energy weapon thing, and then have one of the guys go, I missed. He obliterates a city or something on the planet, and he goes, I missed the rebels. I got to go over, I missed the resistance. I got to go to the left 5 degrees. Can I try that again? I just kept thinking it'd be great if just, boom, missed. Dang it. With this big gun. Totally aside, though. So, you have this interesting framing device where you have, they very quickly get back into all the characters, back into Poe and Finn and Rey. And one of the things that I was kind of hoping would happen with this film, and again, yes, there are expectations going into any film, would be that, say, Poe, Finn, and Rey would be allowed to have one adventure together. Because, Poe showed up in The Force Awakens, but then was kind of swept aside so that the other rebellious character, the rogue, sort of Han Solo, could be in the film. And my big thing with The Force Awakens was that a lot of the characters, who are now our main characters, ended up sort of playing second fiddle to the original cast, be it the Princess Leia, the C-3PO, R2-D2. They each have their kind of analog. Like you look at BB-8, how quickly he disappears from The Force Awakens. Well, how quickly the droid disappears from The Force Awakens when R2-D2 shows up as a literal plot device. I mean, R2-D2 is a plot device in A New Hope, but he's also in Force Awakens, and he is a plot device again in The Last Jedi. Now, I do kind of wish that these characters could have their own space aside from that. And The Last Jedi certainly takes a step towards getting us there. And now with events like the passing of Carrie Fisher, and with the way that this film ends, that there's certainly room for that. By the way, full-on spoilers we are getting into here, so I would recommend not listening to this unless you have seen the film. Whether you love it or hate it either. I'm not going to... I feel that's a good way to expose yourself to it, because I'm not going to actually... After I'm done recording this, I'm going to process a lot of other people's reactions to the film and finally get the gist of what they thought. But you have... obviously, you have... so many things set up by, say, J.J. Abrams and... is it Michael Kaplan? Who's the screenwriter? I should know this. Of The Force Awakens, kind of getting thrown aside. You have Luke immediately tossing the lightsaber. People have been waiting 2 years for this moment, and we dash it. We just dash it by Luke chucking it over his shoulder. You have the Kylo Ren establishing the whole helmet thing. Snoke calls him out for being a Vader fanboy, and then they have his temper tantrum where he smashes at the visage of the helmet that he acquired because it was him just being a wannabe instead of achieving his full potential, which obviously Snoke was trying to goad his anger and make him much more, he's trying to push him into the dark side much further. But it's also interesting that later Snoke will often call back to Darth Vader in a way that glorifies Darth Vader instead of trying to rebuke Kylo Ren for emulating Darth Vader. He rebukes him and says, "You shouldn't be doing that. You're just being a wannabe. Be your own evil." And then later on, he glorifies Vader and says that Kylo Ren should take the steps to then become like Vader. In that throne room scene, there's actually quite a bit of dialogue like that. I thought it was interesting. My wife pointed out that kind of makes sense because, well, Snoke isn't exactly playing fair, and he's also going to do whatever. He's going to basically push Kylo Ren, and that, if Vader can be used as a tool both positively and negatively to, create conflict in Kylo Ren, that makes sense. You have other expectations that are dashed where, Poe admittedly is still kind of apart from everybody. For a great length of this movie, he has his own journey, and I'm still going to be looking forward to, hopefully, in the third film, them all having their own journey together. I would love to see all of these characters interacting with each other, like basically Rey, Poe, Finn, Rose, and BB-8. I would love to see them all interacting together on their own adventure, and maybe not be separated as much, because I also felt that while each character has their own personal journey, Finn's personal journey in this film isn't as potent. Finn often just sort of has the knowledge that they need at the time that they need it, and he doesn't have the same growth arc that he did in The Force Awakens, which is certainly fine. It's mostly they have a cast of excellent characters. They're doing fun and interesting things with them, but I think there could be some tightening overall, just to kind of give a little bit more. This film is very crowded too, and that might be one of the reasons why it feels that way, is you have a lot of characters, you have a lot of plot lines all going at once. I was actually quite happy with all of them, especially with the new addition of Rose. I thought her introduction was not only amazing, like the scene where she's introduced, but how that scene ends. I thought that was brilliant. How she's actually crying and mourning, but then it turns out she's guarding the thing, and when she zaps Finn, and just the way she holds the zapper thing and then puts it away, it's just good stuff, and just wonderfully cast as well. I also liked how it linked into that sort of bomber story from the beginning of the film, when they show they have that one, I believe it was her sister, trying to dislodge the bomb so that they drop on the ship and the bomber. At first, it was just a good moment of storytelling where it's like they gave us this mini story, and I didn't think anything of it. It was like, this is a cool mini story. It has a payoff. When the bombs get dropped, that was all cool. And even the symbol thing, I thought it would be kind of more of a, like when they show the amulet around her neck and the little medallion, I thought that was going to be much more of a spiritual type thing. And lens, like maybe people have this symbol and it's a spiritual thing, but I was totally amazed when it turned out to be much more of like a friendship bracelet linked together two halves kind of thing, that obviously can never be reunited because of this the one death. But I loved that they took that little mini story that was really effective at the beginning, and then that became Rose's story. I thought that was totally that was just, I don't know. It linked. It gave a lot of emotion to Rose's story and meaning, and we kind of get to experience that with her. We understand her feelings because of that scene at the beginning. Just excellent. The interesting thing too is the sort of theme of you need to destroy the past. Kylo Ren
Mm-hmm.
constantly urging to kill the past, to destroy it, to murder it if you have to to get rid of it because it's what's holding you back. In this case, from the dark side. But it's also interesting that the film itself takes that message to heart in how it's trying to break down the myth and the myth that we have in our heads of Star Wars. Because if we can get past that, then we can and start to enjoy new adventures in this universe. Reactions to the prequels are very much based on, I think, our expectations given to us from the original trilogy, how Jedis should be, how the Force should work. If you look at how all of our disappointments that people have, well, the many disappointments that people have with the prequels, as much as people can enjoy the prequels too, midi-chlorians, I guess, being the example, right? Like, we liked the Force. The Force was amazing, but the second you attach midi-chlorians to it, all of a sudden it becomes this dry, stale thing. We didn't, people don't like that, and it ruins the magic, quite literally. And this is going to be very rambly too. So you have Rian Johnson essentially trying to tear down the thing and playing against a lot of expectations by making Luke kind of grumpy. Again, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi both heavily revealed to us that basically Luke, Han, and Leia did not get a happy ending at the end of the happy ending scene in Return of the Jedi. We have a very dark universe still, where you have, the Empire is still a very vivid thing that is capable of building large spaceships that are no match for whatever the Republic had going on, and certainly the Resistance. In fact, everything is kind of gone. You have these dwindling numbers of the Resistance. It's worse. Part of this, you get the feeling is that, or I get the feeling that part of this is definitely a way of setting up more stories in the universe. They want this new Empire thing to stick around for a while, so that at least we can get some more movies out of it. Not a bad business choice in my mind. Okay, so early on in the film, we obviously have these a lot of rug pulls. So many rug pulls. This film basically waxed the floor, fine polished it, threw a rug on it, and then is dragging around the dance floor with a pulled rug. That is the worst metaphor or simile thing ever. It is bad. My wife is texting me. So you have oh my gosh, so much happening. You have these big space battle right at the start. Ships flying around, people dying, lots of destruction. I felt like the getting into the tracking thing. Like, the tracking thing I understood. I just felt like getting into we have to go and disable the things. We have to go here and find a guy. A little clunky. It all works, but mostly just because it's moving so fast. Another example of things moving too fast will be the scene when it is revealed sort of Rey's parentage. It's basically this throwaway line. Now, while it itself is a throwaway reveal because it's similar, akin to Luke throwing the lightsaber over his shoulder, dashing expectations, dashing hopes, and 2 years of waiting, it's a good reveal. I just find it's a bit quick because it's said and there isn't any time for like the reaction to land, because immediately they move on to like the next plot point. And I do wish that there were that was one of the places I felt would have been nicer for a bit more of a reaction, for him to say it, for Kylo Ren to say the revelation, for her to soak in the revelation, and then for her to then I guess react and then deal with it and then move on. But I just felt that there's many places where they try to reveal heavy, weighty things to you, but then they immediately have to get on to the next thing, like, really quickly. But at the same time, the film itself is not, I would say, a bad length. It's not like there's like a ton of unnecessary scenes, and obviously you don't want to have a 3-hour film when you pace out these things, but I feel like there are some things you probably could have cut. Not sure what yet. I'd have to watch the film again, but then paced out a little bit more, just to get a bit more emphasis on some of the reveals and some of the action. you have, I mean, really cool. Poe flying around on his X-wing at the beginning, just shooting the turrets, pissing off the Empire, or the First Order anyway, was really good. The humor, and immediately, like, this film sets its tone very quickly, where it's like things are grim and there's a buttload of humor. It's also amazing how quickly many of the serious moments, many of the serious reveals are followed up by either a scene change to something humorous immediately, or from humorous to sad or melancholy, and back and forth. Like, it does it a lot, and I think a lot of people will experience whiplash. And I believe that some of the rumored reaction that I've heard is that people find that they don't work well together, or that why is the film throwing in all this ridiculous material when you have such heady, weighty stuff that you're trying to create with everyone's moral dilemmas and the temptations of the dark side of the Force and all that kind of stuff. I feel that it works. We certainly see it. A New Hope is very different from Empire Strikes Back, is very different from The Last Jedi, and the same can be said of the prequels. If anything, the prequels, at least from a style and tone standpoint, are probably more consistent with each other than the original films are, because the original film, like A New Hope, nothing had been written or set in stone afterwards. We didn't see the fuller universe. They would come into Empire Strikes Back with a bigger budget and a big tone shift, upping the conflict. And then Return of the Jedi itself, many people criticizing, of course, the goofy Ewoks. And for people who maybe aren't comfortable with the humor and the grimness butting up against each other so frequently and with such force, that I would probably say, or I have two words really, and that is Harry Potter. We see a similar kind of stylistic convention with Harry Potter, where many of the magic and monsters that they encounter, say at Hogwarts, are themselves rather humorous or clever, or there's certain wordplay things going on. And yet you also have, by the end of the Harry Potter films, really dark, scary stuff that I think would frighten the pants off children. Kind of morbid imagery and loss and death and loss and death with consequences for various characters as well as the main characters in Harry Potter. And I don't think Star Wars is. I think Star Wars is trying to do the same thing, at least in the Last Jedi, and it makes for an interesting combination. There's places where it works. There's places where it doesn't work. Again, because there's so many of them, I can't even list or begin to list where those places are. Like the Porg eating chicken, the Porg watching Chewbacca eat a Porg. That is cool. When Kylo Ren and Rey are having their first sort of Force interaction across time and space, and then shooboop, all of a sudden they snap out of it. And Luke comes over. It's like, what are you doing? Or what is that? And it turns out they're looking at the nuns and the hole that Rey's blasted in the wall. And it's a bit of a joke itself. But, that one I kind of felt, I don't know. Like, I'll have to watch it again because I'm not sure if it worked or if it didn't work. And I'm going to probably have to really watch it over time. Although I think it's going to be a film that grows on me as time goes on. Hux. I still do not like Hux. I think, obviously, I like the actor. He's a good actor. Is it Domhnall Gleeson? He's been in good stuff. Also Harry Potter. And he has... just think the character of Hux is a little too mustache twirly. Even though this is Star Wars and the villainy and the villainy and the bad guys are rather mustache twirly to begin with. Snoke in particular, who's sitting in his throne room basically just saying evil, 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 mwaha, evil plan, evil. But I think that what's his face, the Gollum actor Andy Serkis, can sell it with a lot more flavor and menace, and just I think Andy Serkis's voice as Snoke. Obviously, and I guess his performance too. I suppose they did performance capture. Have so much more flavor and meat to the mustache twirling, whereas Hux is rather, I don't know, just when he's barking orders, he's just like full anger. He's got this weird anger to him as he's telling people to do things at the very beginning, and well, even in The Force Awakens. And it's very, it's the one kind of comedic, and it's supposed to be dark and comedic, and it doesn't really work for me. That's one thing that definitely does not work for me is Hux. Though I feel like, there's, I don't know. He does not work for me as a character. I don't need to justify it. I don't need to. Oh gosh. So then you have Finn and Rose who have to go off to that casino planet, Canto Bight. Is it Blight or Bite? I'm already forgetting. But they go off to the planet, and I think 50% works and 50% doesn't. I feel like we should have maybe been exposed to a little bit more of like the casino itself. I was rather surprised that they're allowed to walk around. Like they're not exactly matching the dress code of the place when they get there. That I'm surprised that they were allowed in, because you'd probably, like anybody guarding the door would probably say, well, you guys don't have money, and you don't have you're not matching the dress code of all facilities, so to speak. And so I'm surprised they got in the door. The one alien who kind of speaks like he's John Goodman, the one alien's like, hey guys, I just landed their spaceship here and they're going in. That you kind of expect the aliens to, have a little bit more. I think it would have been fine to actually just have the alien speaking an alien language and have subtitles come up for that moment. But again, that might be hard because the film is probably moving too fast. And maybe that's what they did. But then in focus testing, if once they were in there viewing their final cut, they were just like, this film is moving too fast. We can't just throw up subtitles for this guy. We need to dub him with an English voice, or people aren't going to read the fact they're not going to read the pertinent information in that moment. And so maybe that's what happened there. But a lot of neat things, like how they get imprisoned and how they escape, and BB-8 being filled with coins. A lot of funny things in there. I like that the guards had like a super retro, almost Flash Gordon-y armor. I thought that was kind of cool. Just a very brave design choice in this day and age when every costume has to be super detailed and have tons of have tons of texture work done on them, where these were very plain and simple costumes. I thought that was actually kind of neat, because it's Star Wars. So you can, every planet can be different. Getting into maybe Rey and Luke a little bit, it is very different to see Luke be the grumpy old guy, but also like the cynical old guy. In, say, contrast to, say, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who, when Luke gets to Obi-Wan Kenobi lost. Anakin killed the Jedi, Anakin became Darth Vader, Obi-Wan Kenobi is no longer a Jedi, all his friends are dead, and he has to go hide on a planet for a number of years to kind of shadow watch Luke. But when Luke meets him, Obi-Wan Kenobi and the Empire, of course, takes over everything, and so the Obi-Wan Kenobi is living in a world where the Empire rules, and not rules like the Empire. He lives under the Empire's rule, and it's Obi-Wan Kenobi is actually rather serene. He is at peace. He is. He's rather delightful when he meets Luke. He's rather chipper and happy and everything. Like, he does not express a whole lot of sorrow. And obviously it's like at this point he's older and wiser and has, I guess, a deeper aptitude and understanding of the Force to begin with. But it's an interesting contrast to have Luke not go down the same path and have him be very bitter and cautious and angry and, sort of, I'm still trying to determine, is it good that he downplays the Jedi and like frowns on them and says the Jedi should not be a thing because like the Force is really about everything and everyone. So why is it this elitist thing when really I think Obi-Wan Kenobi was trying to say like the Force is good and you can have good, like Luke is questioning the role of myths and legends, where he's like, I became a legend, and that's what was wrong, is that everyone glorified me, and and it just brought about pain because of all this expectation of a legend. But I'd almost say it's like, the great thing about a legend is that it also gives you an ideal, something to aim for when you yourself maybe feel like you're not, when you're not performing up to par or something. It's not that you are going to be a legend at the end of the day, but say if you have an ideal or a goal to head towards, then you can take the steps in that direction to get there. If I go into a thing saying, hey, I want to read 10 books or something by the end of the month, and if I don't believe I can, then I probably won't, or it'll be harder for me to actually accomplish that if I just go, I can't do this. And so, but if say somebody, look at somebody who has accomplished something and you ask them how they did that, yeah, you're putting them on a pedestal, but you're also trying to understand the keys of their success a little bit, like the thing that allowed them to get through it may or may not work for you. It was very weird to have Luke just be so embittered, and as over the film that embittered, it was just Luke to have Luke so bitter. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word there. He, or even if it's a word. But, the movie could have gone that way and had Luke be the Yoda, had Luke be the, serene. I've lived on this island, I am serene, I am thing. But, immediately right away, they dashed that and said, no, this is not what has come before. At the same time, I think that Obi-Wan, that sort of wise old Obi-Wan character, actually has a place. But in The Force Awakens and in The Last Jedi, we don't have that character. And in the third film, I doubt we will either. But it would be cool to maybe have a little more someone who's got their back with a little more positivity. Which leads me into the next bit. This is the super spoiler, where, of course, Yoda shows up. I am trying to figure out how I feel about that, because there were parts that worked. The conclusion of the Yoda segment I thought was perfect and exactly what needed to happen. How we got into the Yoda segment, what happened in the middle of the Yoda segment, was where things were kind of funny. Because again, they went with the practical puppet, which we have not seen in years, and you can see how filmmaking has changed, where what we've been taught on, especially with CG, we now expect something different. So now to go back to a puppet again is a very difficult thing. But there's moments and shots that I think worked with the Yoda puppet, and there's moments and shots I think didn't work. But where the scene ended up ultimately with Yoda knocking Luke on the head and then saying, finally, Luke's like, I'm going to burn down a tree. And Yoda initiating that, just saying, yeah, we're burning it. Fine. You're not in the wrong here to want to burn the tree. But just remember that, you can, I think Yoda came to kind of be like, you need to mellow out and things will unfold as they should. And, that was certainly Obi-Wan Kenobi's approach to it. And yeah, Luke hasn't achieved that yet. Even though at the end of, Return of the Jedi, it looks like that's where he is. That's where he has been. At the same time, it is somewhat realistic that these people, we've been, I guess, what's the span of time in between Last Jedi and The Force Awakens? These characters have had time to live full lives outside of the 3 adventures, which are only a small part of their lives. People change, right? People age. You see super happy people full of energy and vitality can become kind of, when they get older, they can become a little bit sour and bitter or grim or just tired. It's certainly not outside the realm of realism. And in this case, the story is aiming for a certain type of emotional realism about the characters and about Luke. I loved the sequence where Luke is training Leia, and they cut to all those different things around the island with the porgs, like the porg in the nest and the waves washing over the empty nest with the broken eggs as they're trying to emulate. I believe it was like order and chaos and that kind of thing, and life and death. I loved that sequence. That was an amazing sequence. I feel like when Rey goes into that deep dark hole and confronts like all those mirror images of herself with that weird time loop thing, I thought it was a neat concept. I think visually it felt a little plain and a little too composited because of the constant time looping that they had with the infinite stretch of Rey's. Neat concept. I think that I think some visual reworking of that could have made that work a lot better. A little more, I don't know, just variation in the framing or something, because the space itself felt fake and the composited result felt fake. And this isn't a movie full of CGI stuff, so it doesn't really, and we all know it's fake anyway, but I just thought that was something. This film, okay, so we get to the bit, we're jumping around a lot, but we get to the bit where Rey goes to the throne room with Kylo Ren and Snoke, and they have probably the biggest twist of the film, wherein Kylo Ren assists Rey and kills Snoke, slicing him in half. And that felt, I don't know, we're like, what? At this point, we're halfway, 2/3 through the film. That felt like the big conclusion. And I was so into it. And then by the time that ended, I was like, wait a minute, we still have to get to like the planet thing that they showed in the trailers where they show the red dusty stuff coming up. Like, that's gonna, wow. Like, I was surprised the movie did not end after that scene and that it kept going. And there are many places in this film where it feels like it should end, and yet it keeps going. It's amazing that it could sustain it for as long as it did. Like, this is going to bounce around a bit, but so you have this whole Snoke thing that felt like the ending. The big fight they had with the red First Order guards, all dressed in that red stuff with their funky little sword things. I got to admire the film's ability to use them as a sort of Chekhov's gun that you didn't know. You didn't know the gun was there. You didn't know it was loaded. For the most part, it's just cool decor. They're just sitting there. They're just standing there the whole time. You get it. They're the bodyguards of Snoke or something. Like they lend Snoke importance because they have to protect him. But when they finally become active participants in the story and in that fight, that was just cool. I loved all the slashing and all the kind of all the sparks and explosions, and as the whole room catches on fire and everything. I just loved that bit. That was amazing in so many ways, both visually and from an emotional standpoint. I was really into that scene. Again, sort of felt like we were nearing the end of the film, and then we get to. I'm not going to get into the whole Poe. That one commander that he was at odds with, the Laura Dern's character bit. I thought that was, again, I feel like the payoffs are really good in this film. It's some of the setup to those payoffs is either too quick or not established enough. And so Laura Dern's character is kind of confrontational with Poe. It seems like she's going to be, at some point it actually seems like she's going to be kind of an evil character, but not quite. But she is antagonistic, but then she's antagonistic with a reason, because she has her own orders that Poe doesn't know about, and they have their own objectives that they're trying to do, which are noble. And then when she stays to sacrifice like the ship, the second it was like she's going to activate the hyperdrive, I'm like, they're totally going to ram the ship. Wouldn't it be cool if it'd be so cool if they did that. And then when they start turning it around, it's like, oh yeah, they're going to ram the ship. This is going to be so good. So, oh gosh, yes. And then that part felt like an ending. So she literally skadooshes into Snoke's Star Destroyer, and that silence and just the shots of that was good. Like, see, I feel like that was a good emotional payoff for Laura Dern's character. She does have a good motive. She is sacrificing herself. I just feel like the build up to it didn't fully work. Like, she was not as fleshed out as she could be. Very interesting character, but I mean, I guess wanting more is a good thing from all of these characters. I think there's so many neat characters in this film. Snoke included. I quite liked him, mostly again for flavor. And I wasn't disappointed with not knowing, say, his back thing. But anyway, so Laura Dern crashes the ship blows up. That felt like an ending, because that's usually like, we just blew up the Death Star, kind of a denouement. And then but no, they got to go to the planet. Now there's a battle on the planet. And then of course Finn. This film. One of the things I was talking about with my wife is that, say, compared to a film like Wonder Woman, is that in Wonder Woman you have a fake out with who the bad guy is, and who the God of War Ares is later on, and who that's revealed to be. But for most of the film, it's implied that this one, or it's not implied, it's basically said that this one guy, this German general guy, I don't know his rank, this German guy is the bad guy. He is himself Ares. He's the one fueling all of this. And Wonder Woman has a fight with him partway through the film, and she kills him, which is, it's fine. But it's more of, the film itself didn't commit to the battle. The fight that they have is somewhat smaller. So even though he's taking these gas pills or whatever to make himself stronger and fight harder, the fight itself is actually rather short and very quick and very small. There's not a lot, like in these superhero movies, there's usually like a ton of destruction. There's the big musical swells. There's a payoff when she stabs him and he dies, but it's not the biggest payoff yet, because the movie hasn't gotten you the big ending yet, which happens later on. And again, I don't think the ending of that was super effective. Like, Ares himself, the real Ares himself, is kind of an odd. It becomes its typical superhero fight. But The Last Jedi does a very similar thing, say with Finn. So Finn is barreling his little glider, hopper, sand runner thing into this blaster cannon battering ram thing that they've got. And they build up that moment. They take that's where the movie slows down completely, and you got special effects out the wazoo. You have all these shots of his speeder starting to burn up as the heat from the ray starts to get it. They zoom in the camera pushes into his face and he closes his eyes. The music swells, and then I believe the music also then begins to dissipate. Like, it builds to, this is your death moment, and they fully committed to it with all of the tools that would normally be reserved for the climax of the film. That big death, Gandalf, fly you fools, on the edge of the bridge of Khazad-dûm as he falls to the Balrog kind of thing. But then he doesn't. Then Rose comes and knocks him out of the thing. How she doesn't kill him when they collide, I don't know. But, an amazing moment in itself, and one of the really good fake outs in the film. Getting to that point where it's like, at that point, and with any of these characters, they do the same thing. With Kylo Ren, at that point, at any point, he could choose good or evil. With Finn, at any point, like at that one point, he could die. Kind of similar to Rey as well, a little bit. They toy around with her embracing the dark side, embracing the light a little bit, because she obviously has conflict within her. But I like that with, say, Finn's implied death, that they committed to it with all the tools that they had, and basically said, yeah, we're going to treat this like this is the big death of the movie and it's the end of the film. So but then it keeps going after that. And then Luke shows up, and even that felt like it was going to be the ending. Like, I thought they were totally going to, like, at this point, I'm like, I'm emotionally satisfied. Like, I don't know if I can take much more emotion out of this movie. Like, all my nerves are firing, and I've been exhilarated so far. This movie's been a treat for me. If they cliffhanger this thing, I'm fine. I'll come back. I'll come back in a couple years and see where this picks up, because you guys have satisfied me. I'm good. So Luke shows up and he's standing there. Like, they blow open the door and Luke is standing. All the friggin' walkers are moving up, and the shuttles are sitting there, and the guns are pointed at Luke. And as he's staring them down, I thought that was going to be the end of the movie. And they show a sun, like the music is swelling. It's at its ultimate, crescendo. But this thing is apex music. It can't get any louder. They have the sun, we see Luke's back. It's a sunset shot, with the walkers in the sun. The walkers are in silhouette to the sunset, and I'm like, that's where there's gonna be cut to black, or that little white Star Wars music plays. Like, we're gonna find out, like Empire Strikes Back ending. We're gonna find out what happens, to Han when we come back in the next installment. But no, the movie kept going. It was wow. And so they have even more. And then all of a sudden, Kylo Ren's like, fire at the dude. I'm like, this is normally the start of the next movie here. Like, we're getting 3 movies. This is a treat. So, oh my gosh. And I just kept thinking of the words, Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope, when he's like, if you strike me down, I shall become more powerful. I can't do the voice. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. And I'm just like, Luke is withstanding full-on blaster force of, a bazillion guns. That first shot, though, when it's like the red, the red sand poofing up, that, the implication of blood and disintegration and everything, really powerful there with Luke. And just like the ultimate overkill of, firing that many guns into a central spot, and then having Luke walk through it. That was cool. Obviously we've seen stuff like that. Vader can obviously block, blaster bolts with his hands. And even though the people have said that, like, the Force doesn't work that way in this movie. Look at The Force Awakens. We see Kylo Ren completely hold a blaster bolt in midair at the beginning of the film for, I don't know, however long that scene lasts. So it isn't unheard of to add abilities to the Force. This is the thing that governs all. It's a fantasy magic that governs all life in the Star Wars universe. Holds the universe together. I'm pretty sure it can. If it can, I don't know. There's obviously going to be things that it can do, right? Like, things are alive. Life grows, and if the Force is connected to it, yeah, okay. If you can see the future, you can see the past, you can communicate over distances. What we're really seeing in The Last Jedi is an application of most of the things that the Force has been established doing in other films. We're just seeing it in a much more amplified and, in some cases, visually connected way, where there's less it's more direct. There's less implication. They did it in this film too, where they do the crossfade between Leia and Kylo Ren. Like the same thing they did with, like, Luke and Vader in Empire Strikes Back. Like, they did they basically showed that with Kylo Ren and Leia, and then all of a sudden they do an extrapolation of it with the way that Kylo Ren and Rey are able to communicate with dialogue, pretty much seeing each other, staring at each other, from 2 different locations. Like, an interesting extrapolation of the Force. And so it's a fantasy. Let's make up some rules. Again, let's not stick to expectations. I think that one of this film's, like, it's a strength and a weakness for this film, is that it dashes expectations, allowing new and fun, surprising things. When the original Star Wars was released, I was speaking with my stepmother about this, like, asking her, just like, what was it like when Star Wars came out? And the thing she said was, like, nobody saw it coming. There wasn't Star Wars, and then all of a sudden there was this thing that you had never seen before that you had to see. And I think that Rian Johnson, in making this film, and certainly, Kathleen Kennedy and the people at Lucasfilm, were in agreement that that's what they wanted to give us this time around, was something where we didn't quite expect anything. I can't even imagine what the pitch meetings for this film must have been like. I just cannot imagine how you pitch these scenes and pitch this story, because it is so loaded with material and stuff, and or even what like original drafts of this must have been like, because like there's a lot going on in this film. Okay, so the one thing that would have been interesting at the pitch meeting is when the Millennium Falcon shows up again at the final battle at the end. Because I can see that part of the pitch meeting where Rian Johnson is basically telling this. He's like, this is my idea for the story. We got this, we got this, we got this. And I do believe that because J.J. Abrams is an executive producer, he probably would have had some guidelines or directions to take the story in. And I don't think this film was just like written in isolation and then submitted. But can you imagine? I can just imagine getting to the part in the pitch meeting or the script writing process or whatever part where somebody said, and then the Millennium Falcon shows up. It is interesting the degree to which some of these characters, the older characters, show up as kind of a Deus Ex Machina. But in this case, I believe a Deus Ex Machina that works. It's not a forbidden thing to have. I mean, we're dealing with I don't know. It's a big movie. So Luke showing up at the end, not getting killed, and then being revealed to be an apparition was something. That slice through, part of me is disappointed. Again, the expectation side of me is disappointed there wasn't more of a lightsaber fight at the end, either between, Kylo and Rey, which they're probably saving for the next film, or Luke and, Kylo Ren. And the, at the same time, like, I think I'll get used to it. I went into this film without expectations and also saying Rian Johnson can pretty much do whatever he wants. I will accept it. And now I'm at this point where I'm learning to accept it. I was engaged, right? Like, regardless of how I feel about this material, I find that I was engaged with it, with the humor, with the grimness. That 15 seconds of silence was just brilliant, or however many seconds it is, I don't know. That was good. Like, and then the payoff when the sound is reintroduced and you have that other explosion, like that was just, that is, oh yeah. One interesting thing we had talking on the way home in the car ride was that we got home, we were talking in the kitchen, and the thought was, this movie is very similar to Kung Fu Panda. You have the eager young student who shows up to a master. Oh gosh, who's Dustin Hoffman's character? It's not Uguay. It's oh gosh, the little like rodent thing. So you have the reluctant teacher who is trying to achieve inner peace when student shows up, and then at some point in the story, the old turtle shows up to, like, the turtle who is instructing the master. Okay, I am totally jumbling this. I got to look up the character names, but Kung Fu Panda has a very similar kind of setup to. I mean, and it's that typical like student hero master thing, right? But if you look at the way Kung Fu Panda unfolds, it's very similar to the relationship that Luke Skywalker and Rey have. Okay, so you have. Let me just get into this. Dustin Hoffman plays Master Shifu. So Master Shifu is basically handed the torch from Master Uguay. Yeah, Uguay. So Master Uguay is retiring. He's sort of the Yoda character. He dies and disappears. And then Master Shifu, he has achieved inner peace. Master Shifu is then trying to achieve inner peace, but then, he's now a master. Po, the panda, comes along and disrupts Master Shifu's peace or achievement, or trying, his own little journey. He's reluctant to teach him, and there's a scene in Kung Fu Panda when Uguay shows up and then has to basically tell Master Shifu to lighten up, and things will be okay, right? Like, it'll be all right. Like, the movies have the same thing. There was another movie that I was thinking of when I was watching The Last Jedi, and I cannot remember it. But just yeah, it's interesting how I do wish that C-3PO, R2-D2, and Chewbacca, and to some degree the Millennium Falcon, I kind of wish that they fell by the wayside, because I feel like when they show up, and they're not the worst callbacks, because they're actually, they seem like they're actually active in the story to some degree, even though Chewbacca just will show up whenever, shoot things and then disappear. But I feel like it's those, those callbacks are sort of what's holding the series back at this point, because I feel like Finn, Poe, Rey, now Rose, all have, and Kylo Ren, all have enough interesting stuff going on their own and with their interactions with each other, that they could carry a movie by themselves without Luke, without Leia, without Han, not and necessarily without even dwelling on them or thinking of them. Again, the appearance of Yoda also feels like that. It was weird, it shows up and instantly I started feelings I had when watching Return of the Jedi. But I'm like, I don't want this film to be Return of the Jedi. I want this film to be its own thing, to be able to stand on its own legs. I feel like the way that The Force Awakens left, that The Last Jedi could certainly stand on its own legs with less involvement from the other characters. I mean, even C-3PO in random shots quoting the odds of things. I was like, I don't feel like I need C-3PO or R2D to be here anymore. I am fine to part ways with them and enjoy the time that we shared with them in other parts of the original trilogy. They, and the way they carry that story, I'm so ready for this story to belong to our new set of characters, and for it to be theirs. Captain Phasma, that was her little finale was really cool. Just well played, like the broken helmet and like the eye. Oh, that, like, just there's some good imagery in there. Also really impressed that the cinematographer who worked with Rian Johnson on Brick, and I'm not sure if he's worked on all the subsequent films that Rian Johnson has done, but really cool to see that, like, that cinematographer, who again was probably just starting out at that point, or like first feature film kind of a deal, now gets to shoot like this big, I thought it was rather well shot. That throne room with the red and some of the color washes they had in various places, really well done. Some good lighting choices in a lot of places, and it might just be because Star Wars allows for, like, because you have funky sets and different design aesthetics, you can probably play around with lighting a lot more. Like, there's places where they'll silhouette faces and silhouette things, and that you don't really get to do in other movies, because other movies have a much more unified lighting look, whereas this film will say, well, what kind of, even The Force Awakens did this, like, what kind of lighting do we really need for this scene? Like, they've got happy scenes and dark scenes, and the lighting will change quite dramatically. Like, I'm just thinking of when Rey is in the escape pod and they bring her onto the ship, and when she's first in the escape pod, and it's like she's in like a dark silhouette, almost silhouette kind of thing, whereas, and then other parts of the film she's rather lit up with either lightsaber lights or like direct glows from things. Just quite a lot of variety in terms of lighting. Not that, but from a technical standpoint, I don't really have too much to say about the film. The visual effects are pretty awesome, and I don't know, some of the larger, like when CG cameras move, I don't necessarily like that so much. I find that there's this Lord of the Rings tendency to have the camera sweep through an entire environment a lot. I guess one example, like whenever Finn and Rose are riding on something, whether it be like the that two-legged AT whatever walker, or when they're on the backs of that those galloping things, like those shots where like that's all evident, like the entire environment is CG and that thing is CG, or they're on this animated moving either robot or organic creature. I find that those shots didn't hold up for me, but I loved the integration of the people when they're in those little skimmer things at the end. Like the camera moves there felt really good, because like the integration of, maybe it's because they're sitting in a rigid cockpit and so it's easier to do. I just felt like those shots looked really good. When the camera would start out super wide, looking at the whole environment, and then it would go in, and all of a sudden you're looking at Poe as he is sitting there. I just thought that was cool too. So the other thing, so many endings in this film. So many endings. What else? Guillermo del Toro? No, not no. If he was in this film, that would be rather surprising. Benicio del Toro. Sorry, his character was rather interesting. I don't know if I missed hearing that he was cast in the film or if I forgot it. But when he showed up, like normally I'm not a huge fan of him, but I'm actually growing to like him a lot more because he was very interesting in this film. Almost to the point of being out of place because his character is so different. But again, it turns out he's just sort of like he's filling that, scummy traitor Lando kind of role. Like Lando showing up in Empire Strikes Back is certainly unexpected. Like, you don't really think Han has too many friends, and all of a sudden, oh, Han's friend, great. But I don't know, really interesting character there. Just you can tell he was having fun with it, and just some interesting moments with like really interesting acting decisions on his part too. Like I don't think I've seen him have that much fun in a role. I mean, maybe he's just really good at hiding the fact that he has fun because he's an actor and it's his career, so he must be having some kind of fun, or maybe the money's really good. But I don't know. It's cool to see an actor having fun. I mean, when he showed up in Guardians of the Galaxy, you're just like, okay, you're here for like he had a fun role in that film, I guess, but this was way more fun. Yeah, just really interesting. The big question, I guess, is I'm not even sure where you go from here. At the end of obviously you want more conflict between the good and the evil, the light and the dark side, and you want a big battle and a confrontation and everything, and the rebellion and the First Order. But with how this film ended and sort of my expectations, like, okay, The Force Awakens ends with with a definite what'll happen next kind of thing, right? Rey presenting the lightsaber to Luke, and that's what we were all wondering for 2 years here. What's going to happen next? Well, at the end of this film, I don't really have any expectations. Or like this needs to happen next, or I have no vision. I have no idea what could happen, and that might actually be the best place to be, because then I don't know, they can almost do whatever they want, especially with Snoke being dead. Holy cow! Like I'm glad we don't like. I don't know. It'd be cool not to have to sit through a third film of him, because it would be way too much. It'd be way too Star Wars. If all of a sudden he lived. And the next film, he's like, and now we are planning our next big plan. Muhaha. It'll be interesting to see Kylo Ren take those reins and institute maybe his own little reign of terror without necessarily, and he might be even more uncontrolled because he doesn't have a quote unquote tutor in Snoke. Did I use the right name earlier? Did I say like Snape or something? Well, in Snoke. It's cool that with Snoke dying that there's now no expectation that in the next film there'll either be a moral dilemma or that Kylo Ren will have to decide something. I mean, he still could, but I mean, it's not going to be at the hands of Snoke. So yeah, great payoff, great surprise. I totally don't care that nothing is really explained about Snoke at this point, and I'm finding that the whole most of the stuff that J.J. Abrams set up in The Force Awakens to be like, hey, this is a big mystery, there should be a payoff, actually is not a big mystery, and there isn't that much of a payoff. That seems to be the best way to deal with those kinds of cliffhangers or the mystery box problem, is to simply just be like, nah, because it worked really well in this film. This is going to be an interesting film to watch a second time. For me though, I'd almost say I feel like it was. Initially, I'm like, it was on par with The Force Awakens, where I came away from it very satisfied, had a few questions and some criticisms. And I think in hindsight, a couple hours later, I might be more satisfied with this film but I also might have more criticisms, and I also, I don't know. Oh yeah, Rey. I just feel like Rey. We're coming into this, and it's kind of obvious that it's 2 years later because her character does seem a bit different at the start of the film, tonally. And I don't know. I don't feel like the actors quite had as much, quite as much. Because most of these actors are now sort of off in their own stories, like, you know, 4 different storylines that kind of intersect a little bit, because they're all in 4 different, I guess you could say 4 different locations for great portions of the film, that there isn't as much room for interaction, and because of that, their characters don't manifest as much as they did in, say, The Force Awakens. I feel like the conflict, like looking at Poe as a good example, he's got lots of humorous moments, or not Poe, Finn, sorry. They gave Poe way more screen time in this film, but because he wasn't interacting with Rey and didn't even meet Rey until the end of the film or anything, you know, there's no chance for those 2 personalities to interact with each other and juxtapose in this film. And then because Finn is interacting with Rey, like the interactions that Finn had with Rey in The Force Awakens were really fun and engaging. And here he does that with Rose, but we don't really see, like, Rose isn't interacting with Rey. Rey interacts solely with Luke most of the time. And then when she's interacting with Kylo Ren, it's in these separate locations, alternating location shots where I'm not sure that the actors would have been together. They probably would have had a stand-in. And so maybe maybe for the sake of acting, they did bring them together, but I feel like that might be to the film's detriment, is that the actors probably don't have as much to cling on to with their roles, because I think they did a wonderful job expressing their personalities in The Force Awakens. And while they certainly have conflicts in this film, it's just those little teeny moment-by-moment interactions that maybe were lost as a result. Although I think Rose maybe takes up a bulk of that, as she is sort of like the wonderful new character who gets a lot more of those moments. I'm thinking of like when Rey puts on the helmet in The Force Awakens, and she's got that, she's looking around and just almost kiddish. I thought that was, those moments are kind of lost. Now, granted, Rey is kind of growing up here. She's experiencing some harder lessons, and dealing with the Force and stuff. So there's, it's not going to be the same tone by far, but I feel like that initial personality of Rey wasn't fully expressed in this film. Although I think maybe Rose and Kylo Ren probably seem to carry that. Kylo Ren was probably the most consistent across both films, I would think. But then again, I feel like Kylo Ren had more opportunities to emote in The Force Awakens. Whereas because we have so many characters and we're jumping around a lot, it's just not as cohesive, or not as, we don't get to see as much of a build in individual scenes. That's I think my one criticism. I have many criticisms. There's more than one. Who cares? Yeah. I don't know how much more I have to say about the film. This is going to be fun to watch a second time at some point. They really should just start releasing these things. Like, you saw the film, here's your DVD to take home or something, because having to wait now to watch it again is going to be interesting. It'll be nice to have that distance, though, and watch it again a second time. Certainly a very busy film. Better than a lot of other blockbusters, because you look at busy films like, say, Transformers: The Last Knight, where it's just a mess. This is like a justified mess. And I don't know. I don't know if mess is even the right word, because it's there's detritus spraying everywhere, exploding everywhere, and it's actually kind of fun to watch this one, go off. It's, I don't know. Yeah, it's a shift, but it might be a good shift. I think I'm going to look on this favorably, and I think kids will love it. I think kids will see the dark portions and go, ooh, darkness. Like, they'll The melodramatic parts to an adult will probably seem like really cool to kids, especially say like Hux and Snoke or something. Though I think kids will love that part. I don't know how long I've been rambling for, but I'm going to call it a night. And I don't know if you want to leave some thoughts, please do. Now I'm going to go read a ton of articles now and see what everybody else is saying. All right, catch you later.